Welcome to the Psychovertical podcast. I'm your host, Andy Kirkpatrick. I apologise, I've not done any podcasting for a while. It's funny when you feel you've got an unlimited amount of time, you kind of feel like time seems to mean nothing, doesn't it, when you have so much of it? So I don't feel like I've been on such a tight deadline, but I apologise. Oh, there I am tutting again. I thought what I'd do is a friend of mine, Kelly Cords, is currently reading chapters from his book, The Tower. I think he's reading one every other day. Now, like Kelly's like a fantastic writer. I'll try and remember to put a link for it somewhere in the podcast. And I thought I'd maybe do like I'd probably steal the idea. I'm not gonna read a whole book, but I've had a few questions from people about writing, because I think a lot of people are sat on their arses with nothing else to do. So all of a sudden everyone wants to start writing the memoirs, and I had a phone call the other day from some famous like mountain biker who wants to write his memoirs, and so everyone's got like time on their hands. And the thing about writing, I think I've mentioned this in other podcasts. Often people will say, "Oh, I'm just retiring. I'm going to start writing," and writing is a little bit like saying, I'm retiring. I'm going to start like open heart surgery. Like writing is a skill. It's like taking up like becoming a carpenter or something. It's not necessarily something you can just do, straight off the bat. Well, some people can, but there's quite a lot to it. So I thought what I might do. I'll probably try and do this every other day, because I can't be doing it every day because I've got too much to do. So I am actually trying to finish. I am finally getting to the end of finishing my book, my down book, which is really really cool. Like this whole stuff that's going on. It doesn't seem to be changing my life at all. Like I seem to spend my whole life by myself, not doing anything, like just like sat in one place doing writing and stuff. So for me, it doesn't not really. In fact, it's been quite good because I've not had to do anything else. So, but I'm finally getting to the end of my down project now. Vanessa, my wife, is currently proofreading it, and as each chapter is proofread, it's like sent off to several people who can basically call me out for some things. And there's a few things which have been quite good, because Vanessa has been able to say, this doesn't make any sense, or would you really do this? Or because one thing in the book, I tried to make sure that everything in the book is something I've actually done in the past. It's not like full of like weird, kind of like forum kind of like, oh, why don't we make like a cordelet out of like 15mm rope and it'd be super strong and blah blah blah. So it's trying to be very sticking to practical stuff that you might need, or so it's been quite good. She's been like saying this isn't going to work, and yesterday, like I had something in there. It's I call it like a buddy block. So if there's two of you and you're abseiling, and one person's only got a gree, another person's got a gree and a belay device, then it's this buddy block where the one person blocks the rope with a belay device, and the other person can just wrap on one rope with a gree. And I had like a diagram, I'd written it out, but I'd actually missed out like an important thing. So she was like, does actually work? I was like, yeah, I've done that. And she was like, does it actually work? So I had to run out, like a lot of my climbing stuff is like in a different country, so I don't have any, but I had enough climbing stuff to go and set it up, and I realized it didn't actually work how I'd written it down. So I had to like rewrite it, redo the diagram, and in that, if you want to know how it works, is you basically, so you've got your rope through. This only really works if you're on abseiling on sort of fixed belays like wrap rings and things. Is you have the rope fed through, and generally, you use like this blocking technique usually where you tie a knot in the rope and you clip it into the other rope, and one person, everyone abseils on one rope and then you pull it back down. If you've only got a single rope, rappelling device like a gree. So this was just a technique where you put on your belay device, your normal belay device onto the rope, and then you put your Prusik loop on as well, ready to abseiling down, and then you just like twist them all around, you twist the rope around above the belay device, and then you clip the belay device into the wrap ring or the mayon or whatever, and because the rope's twisted, it can't move, and then the other person just wraps on one rope with a gree, and then you just unclip it, untwist, you clip it into your harness, and you abseil back down. So it's just any things like that. So the moment Vanessa is reading through it, and each chapter is being sent off to people, I'm just getting these final little things. And it's always when you do a project like this, like it's so intense. Like if I was writing just like a fictional book or a book like a biographical book, it would be easy because it's not so difficult. There's no like problem if it's wrong. Like in Cycle Verticals, there's a chapter where I'm abseiling down this north face of the Dwats, and we end up on this like blank piece of rock, and the only piton we could find, the only anchor was like a knife blade in a horizontal crack, and it went in about like 1 inch, and we had to pull the ropes down and then rappel off this single piton. And Esmond Tresida, who was like climbing partner, and like I'd actually read the story about Mug Stump and Jim Bridwell doing exactly the same thing on the I think it was on the Moose Tooth in Alaska, and I'm like, you don't have to clip into the piton when I'm abseiling on it, because if it pulls out, you're gonna die. You're gonna get pulled off by me, and we're on like a ledge which is probably like a foot long little ledge. So you could actually stand in balance without being clipped into the piton. Now, and my recollection is that Esmond unclipped from the peg, and I abseiled off the peg, and it didn't pull out, thank God. And after about like 20 meters, there was a crack, and I put a cam into the crack and clipped the rope into one rope. So if the piton was to break, it was to pull out, then I would probably survive, because I would fall 20 meters, and hopefully the cam would hold me, but Esmond would be screwed. And then it got to the next anchor, and then Esmond came down, and then the ropes wouldn't pull, so Esmond had to then like Jumar up the rope off this piton and sort it out. So that was the story in the book. And then when the book came out, Esmond was like, that I did have to abseil. That was a true story about the piton, and I did have to Jumar up the ropes, but it wasn't on the piton. It was like on another anchor. So I'd like amalgamated these two stories like into one, but does it really matter? Does it really matter if it's not true? Like, it probably makes it like a little bit more, yeah. But so anyway, so if you're writing sort of like all anything you write about yourself and about your experiences is always semi-fiction, because there's three forms of truth. There's like your truth, their truth, and the truth. And it's like who even what is the truth, what is a fact. So there's always an element of things not being true. But when you're writing a book, like a technical book about how not to die climbing, there's not much room there for things which aren't true or things you've just made up. So it's very stressful. But your nose is against this book, so for such a long time, you start to lose all sense of. It's like so complicated, the book, and there's so many intermingling elements of the book. Literally at the moment, I'm like last night I was laid in bed, and so the aim of the book is about descending off mountains. So it's not just about abseiling. It's about how to get down off a mountain without killing yourself. And then I was thinking about this time when I had to piggyback someone off the top of El Cap who weighed like 70 kilos or something. So like for 9 hours, I had to piggyback them down. And I was thinking how I'd used the rucksack, and I'd sort of filled up the bottom part of the rucksack and sort of tied her onto the rucksack. So so she didn't have to hold on to me. Like, holding on to someone is actually very difficult. Piggybacking is actually quite tiring for you. It's even more tiring for you to hold on to them. So basically, she was like sitting almost sitting on top of the rucksack, which meant it wasn't that difficult to carry them down. You just have to be really, really slow. And she did break her leg in the process, but she did get down. So technically, I win. So I was like, oh God, I need to like, actually, I should include something like that, like how to get people down if they're injured or something. And then I was like, and then there's this technique where you use a rope. So you get like a coil of rope, and you make a harness of someone's legs go through the coils of the rope, and you can like carry someone down. So I'm laid there, like midnight, like thinking about this, like, oh, I need to add this, and what else do I need to do? I need to do like making a stretcher out of a rope, or like so. This is the problem with the book. Like, even like, the book is really, really close to being finished, but as soon as it's gone, it's going to be like, damn, like I needed to do this, I need to do this. And all the books I've been doing like this, like higher education, are all print on demand books, which means that there's not like 4,000 copies of the book printed at once. So I am able to change things around and update things, and like I looked on higher education at the moment on Amazon. It's got like I think it's got 35 reviews, which is really cool, because it's like a really expensive book, and it's like really, it's like a super niche. It's a niche within a niche. Like I was saying to my son yesterday about how he was like, Dad, like you're like a climber, but you don't really talk about climbing, or you're not really, most climbers are just about climbing, but you're not. You're about all these other kind of things. And I was like, yeah, you have to find your niche within a niche. And I guess I found like I'm several niches in, I guess, stand-up comedian, climbing, big wall climber, whatever. So I had like 35 reviews for the book, which was like really, really cool. But when you read through them, you can see things that you need to change. So one thing about Down is I really, really wanted it to be really clear what the diagrams were about, each diagram, because I knew that was a problem before, and it was a problem of layout. Basically, if you've got 200 300,000 words, and you've got all these complicated diagrams, getting them all to be in the right place is a nightmare, because you get everything laid out, and then you just increase the font size by 1 because of you realize it's too small, and then all the images are in the wrong place to all the text, and you just get in this like anyway. So I found a way of doing this, which means that the diagrams are the more like how they're set out. All the diagrams are on one page, so it's much easier they're like modular. I can move them around much more easily as the text kind of is adjusted at the final stage. So everything is like hopefully everything is much clearer. But that means now I need to go back to higher education and redo higher education, redo all the layout, because it's, if someone's going to spend like $40 on a book, it should be as good as I can make it. So that's what I'm doing. That's all I'm doing at the moment, is just sort of trying to finish the last diagrams for the book, and at the same time getting the feedback from people who are reading the book and from Vanessa, and just actioning those things. But so hopefully, like people keep asking me, when is it going to be finished, and it's like as soon as possible. And I was probably disturbed in that Vanessa read, there's a chapter which is just on equipment. There's one chapter about tools, like descending tools, and includes hand wraps and arm wraps, and South African abseiling technique, like physical, where you just use your body, all the way down to all sorts of obscure things. And Vanessa's like, and there's an equipment chapter as well, which discusses loads of rapid links, rat rings, abseil tart, Prussic loops, all that kind of stuff. And Vanessa was like, "Oh, it's a bit wordy. Maybe you're going into too much detail in the book." And I'm like, "Oh God, maybe I am. Maybe I'm being too detailed." And that probably is the problem with all the books I write, all these kind of books, is I'm really literally trying to squeeze out like every drop of information in my head about all these and all these kind of things. So maybe it is, maybe it's a problem, but. That's the kind of books I like. I like books where, you go into like really, really tiny bits of anal detail. Like I was reading something about I've been getting interested in sort of military clothing because it's a very good example of when you have like a design, you have to design something for practical end user, and then you're getting all this feedback over a long period, and it's adjusting. So the clothing is being adjusted to what the demand is, and so how like a piece of equipment evolves. And for me, like a lot of like mountaineering clothing sort of fed into military kind of clothing because people are in the outdoors and they have to be able to move and all that kind of stuff. And so I've been like reading about a lot of this kind of stuff because I'm just finding it kind of interesting, like why, how pockets, like I had a jacket recently when I was in Alaska, and this jacket, which was a really, really good jacket, but the pockets kept filling with snow. And I was like, why, like what a pain in the arse. Like you only start realizing when something isn't well designed, when it doesn't work. Otherwise you don't even realize it. Things like the other day I was talking to Vanessa. I was like, do you know how old a button is? Like the humble button. And she's like 400 years old. I was like, no, it's like 4,000 years old. Like the button's like one of the earliest kind of things that people made in order to keep animal skins together and all this kind of stuff. So yes. Anyway, in this process of reading this, I was reading about this German rifle that mountain soldiers used to use in the Second World War, but it had a reinforced butt, not the arse of the butt that goes in your butt of the rifle, the butt of the joke, and it actually had metal plating on it, and the reason was that when if you're like a mountaineering soldier, you often use a rifle to like almost like a ski pole, like using it like a stick. So they had to reinforce the thing. So for me, in my brain, that's kind of that's interesting information because it's the feedback from the end user to the designer, and they've like made a change, and for some reason in my autistic brain, I always find that kind of stuff interesting. So, but I'm gonna talk. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna, for people who want to get into that's what I want to get into reading. People interested in writing. What I'm going to do, I'm going to read something I've written in the past, and then I'm going to maybe I'm going to go through it again. So you can listen to me reading it, and if that's good, then you can if you enjoy that, then you can just stop there. But then I'm going to maybe try and read back through it and just talk about the why it's written the way it is, or some sort of some kind of background to it. Because I don't know what I'm gonna, as usual, I've not actually read the thing I'm going to read out. I'm just going to read it, and then go back. So there might be nothing about it, but I guess I should point out before I start reading it, because the other day someone asked me if I had any formal training to be a writer. Now, anyone who's read anything I've written will know that I have no training whatsoever in anything. So no, I did English at school, but I didn't do very well. I was in like remedial English classes. I couldn't basically read until I was quite old, like 13 or something, and I wasn't very good at writing, but I think I had a very good imagination, so that's very important. So I don't know I don't really know anything about grammar at all. Like I don't know what a verb is or a noun, or I have a real problem with spelling and this kind of stuff. And like a really famous publisher, editor was Ken Wilson. And Ken Wilson gave me this really good advice once, that, you know, when you're writing a book, you have to make it absolutely perfect, because if you don't, you know, it's going to be there forever. It's almost like having a child, and that child is going through the world being a complete arsehole or whatever, and it's your fault. So it's a little bit like that. So that stuck in my mind. And I had a real lot of respect for Ken Wilson. And when I won the Boardman Tasker Award for my first book, Psychovertical, I remember he wouldn't give me any feedback on it. Like I met him a few times. He would never tell me what he thought of it. And then one day, I can't remember how it happened. He told me that my editor, Tony Whittam, was the kingmaker, which I guess he thought that I wasn't a very good writer, and Tony had basically written this book. Really. And when I won the Boardman Tasker, the judges did say that the structure of the book was really interesting, and that was probably down to Tony Whittam, not down to me. Which is these are things that you got to deal with, basically, if you look and sound like you're not very clever. And Ed Douglas said that was my problem, is that I was cleverer than people thought. So, but with all these things, I think probably the reason why Ken thought that was, for a long time I'd been writing for magazines. I've been writing for like Climber magazine, climbing, and all this kind of stuff. And recently I found an email that I'd sent to somebody at that time, and it was almost like illegible. Like it was absolutely terrible. And people must have made such huge, like allowances for me. Like there was something, I was like mentally ill or something. Like my poor editor, who wrote, who was edit my like gear columns. Christ Almighty, like he really did. He must have put in like so many hours just trying to translate what I was writing into some kind of English, and so maybe I can imagine the word would get around, because everyone kind of knows each other in that world, that this person was, although idiot savant is probably just an idiot basically. And so I would say, I often say to young people, like, it's really important to get your fucking act together, like how you speak and how you write, how you spell, your grammar, all this kind of stuff. Because I was really lucky. Well, I could say I was lucky. Like if I'd actually been more careful and less slapdash, I could probably be a much more successful person. But it never really seemed that important. Like why do I still not know what a verb is, or a noun, or all that kind of stuff? Because it doesn't really, it's not necessary for me to remember what it is. Like I could Google it now. I could tell you what it is. But I'd just forget it straight away. So, because it's not important. But it really is important if you're trying to make an impression. Is if you're sending emails, or you're writing work and you're going to send it to like the New Yorker or whatever, you've got to make sure it is fucking perfect. One little, like you often I'll often write a tweet, and I'll be like, yeah, that is a fucking good tweet. That's amazing. That's totally gonna amazing tweet. And then I'll reread it like 10 minutes later, and there's a bloody spelling mistake in it. And as soon as someone sees a spelling mistake, they're like, this guy's an idiot, he's a retard, like just ignore him. So, and the same with speech as well. You got to try and be, it's all about communication. So I reckon Ken Wilson thought that, really. And as for the structure of Psychovertical, like when I first met Tony Whittam, my editor, that was the only thing I had, was the structure. This guy climbs this route over 11 days, and every other chapter is one day on that climb, and every chapter in between is his whole life. leading up to that climb. And it's like, so that's how the book was sold. So you have to be, yes, it's I guess the more you write, the more you prove that you have some value as a writer, that your voice is it's good. And but then if you write a load of old shit, then you kind of prove the opposite, that people were right, that you have no talent. And that's maybe the problem for me again with blogging and stuff, is that I don't really put any effort into really editing anything or rereading it or getting anyone else to read it. And for me it's kind of disposable. So I have lots of stuff on my for me it's as long as it's got some tiny little value, like you say, oh, that's an interesting idea, or I never thought like that before. Then it's just a thing of it by itself. Really, it's not meant. Like, I haven't got time to spend a week writing one blog post. Like, sometimes I might write one every single day, and I'll just kind of bang them out, because it's just data. It's not meant to be anything else. But books are kind of different. So I'm gonna read you a story out of my book, Unknown Pleasures, available from Vertebrate Publishing, which is a collection of lots of. It's called Unknown Pleasures because the idea was it wasn't. Some of it is actually quite kind of uncomfortable to read. It begins with lots of pretty good climbing related short stories, which are based on it's almost like a best of, like a hits kind of best hits kind of thing. And then it goes more and more into things which aren't anything to do with climbing, and various. They're all about climbing to some extent, but some of them are more about sort of my life and like weird, weird things that go on in my head. So I shall read you this story. So this is called The Edge of Myself, which is about a solo ascent of the Sea of Dreams, which was like 2016 or something. Not sure when it was. It was some time in the past. And I wrote this sitting in the cafeteria in Yosemite in a what's it called? Anyway, and so I probably wrote it out in one sitting. Like I wouldn't have worked out a structure or anything. I would have just started writing it, and then I would have got to the end, and then I probably would have read through it once, and then I would have posted it on my blog, and then a few years later I copy and pasted it, and then probably maybe I read it, I don't know, but then it ended up in this book. So I guess the editor went through it, but I don't think John, who's the editor, really changed very much. He probably just checked all the spelling mistakes. Oh, Vanessa, my wife, read through it as well, so she might have. When the book was finished, when the book was being edited, she read it before it got sent to the editor. She probably sorted out some spelling mistakes. But basically the structure is how it was made. So we shall explore it together. So I have my cup of tea here. Have one last quick little drink of tea. It's gone cold. So okay. My last day, my first easy day, ended long and hard and painful as I scraped and scrambled, tired and tangled, silent partner locking, the rope running out, on to the rim of El Cap. I had been alone on the wall for 14 days, 4 of them on half water rations and the scraps of my food bags. I staggered, stood, staggered again, pulled hard on the still heat of the... Pulled hard in the still heat of darting lizards and baking dwarf trees with charcoal bark, away from the edge, until I was sure I was beyond gravity's high water mark, safe from the sea. I stood there for several minutes, unsure what to do, how to feel, stand or sit, laugh or cry, my legs equally unsure how to address the horizontal world again. But then it's always like that. I know the feeling well. It had been my 4th El Cap solo, my 34th route up the Captain. I know how it feels at the end. The relief, the sadness, so desperate for it to be over for so long, yet wanting to hang on. The Sea of Dreams is a route that maintains a mystique, a route that retains a grade of A4+. If you fall, you die, even though it was put up in 1978. Time has no doubt mellowed the climb, with several well-known features, such as the surfboard having fallen off it, as well as some bolts and rivets being added. Nevertheless, it still deserves a Jim Bridwell grade of PDH, pretty damn hard, in most people's books. Although a classic, the sea is rarely climbed, maybe one ascent every 2 years, and there are many stories of teams bailing off it. Tales of loose and dangerous rock, run-outs, scary obligatory free climbing and bad belays. It is one of the few routes that still has mostly old bolts. Robert Steiner, the German translator of my books, Psychovertical and Cold Wars, lost a finger on the route when a loose flake broke and chopped it off. No one I've ever met who has climbed the route has anything but respect for the first ascensionists. They had set out to create the hardest, longest, most sustained big wall climb in the world. The first part of the trip was spent climbing Zodiac. For my 7th time, with my mate Charles, who wanted to lead a big wall, and my eye was drawn over to the North America wall and the sea. This area of the wall is like looking over at Mousetrap Zone in Gogarth. Tons of black, loose diorite, mega steep and obviously death on a stick. Tempest scared me a bit, but it travelled up solid golden granite. But the sea scared me even more. The horror stories of pitches like Hucko Buck, the Peregrine Pillar, and the Blue Room, and the expanding belay, cams placed in an expanding crack. Having hung in my mind for years, dispelling my desire to climb it. The Peregrine Pillar scared me most. These words from Nick Beckworth have stuck with me since I read them online in the late 1990s. After our third bivvy on the wall, I took the Peregrine Pillar pitch that morning. This pitch turned out to be one of the hardest, scariest pitches of the climb for me. Starting with a long stretch of no pro 5/8, I arrived at the base of 2 loose pillars, which I would have to climb up the middle of. Watching my cams expand and contract in the loose diorite, I half free climbed, half aided to the top of the pillar. Next was some tricky nailing with a bad fall to the pillar if things went wrong. A few moves up, I started pounding in an angle. The rock started moaning and would not stop. I tapped all the rock around me, all loose and hollow. The moaning continued. I thought sure the entire face was about to go. Finally the moaning ceased. I decided not to take any more swings at the pin. I tied it off and continued upwards. Finally, some better pins. Then at the belay, and not a moment too soon, this was a long pitch. There was probably no other route on El Cap that scared me more than the sea. But then, why not do it for that very reason? Why should I let what others say or write about these pitches put me off? About death falls from a puzzle of skyhook moves, of car-sized blocks that rattle and move when you nail them, or pillars that hang like Jenga blocks that have to be free climbed, and from the top of which the hard aid climbing begins. I had come to sort my head out, to reboot my body and mind. Something nothing can do like a hard wall can. Why run from such a heady dose? I had already done Bridwell's other classics on this part of the wall, Pacific Ocean Wall and Zenyatta Mandata, and thought the sea would be like these, hardish but okay, the shine gone from what was once state-of-the-art routes, that I'd get the tick, but really it would all be in the minds of those who had not climbed them. But it would be hard, but I'd nail it and come down a hero, overcoming all the stories and just dealing with the hard facts. So up I went, a huge rack, 30 litres of water and 10 days' food that could be stretched a little, years of experience to guard me against what I might find. I was ready for battle, but not a war. It didn't seem to take long to climb all the lower pitches, which although not easy were okay with care and attention, and reach the continental shelf and the hook or buck pitch. This was the first if you fall you die pitch on El Cap, and involved crossing a vertical wall mainly on skyhooks with rivets and old pegs at the start for protection. At the halfway point you lower off a rivet, a 5mm machine bolt hammered into a shallow hole will swing round until you can reach an edge with a skyhook. Then the fun starts, as you begin a game of chess with the rock, hooking further and further right, stepping high with hooks on tiny nicks and edges, searching for the next hook. You slowly get to the point that if you fall, you will fall into the corner from around 30 metres below. Luckily, protection is at hand halfway to the belay in the form of a nest of copperheads. Unluckily, when I reached them, I saw that all but one had fallen out. Getting out my copperheads, I tried to replace them, but the depth of these heads is as shallow and ill-defined as if you pressed a matchstick into some clay. Fortunately, there was a solid flake beside them, so I backed up the heads with a bomber skyhook held down by my tag bag. Funnily, I'd actually believed this was true at the time. From there, you press on. You never weight the heads, they're only there for pro. Hooking further and further, hoping you won't go the wrong way and end up in the book. And there's the belay. It's done. It's boring to describe every pitch, but I doubt I've climbed a route so sustained and mentally exhausting, an experience probably not helped by being alone. I was out of condition at the start, and my hands swelled up so much I couldn't get my gloves on. I just had to hope, and the speed with which they healed was greater than the pain. Again and again, I got to the point where I could not puzzle out how to progress. One time, I had to wrap off and try again the next day. But each time, I solved the puzzle by following my big wall motto, if in doubt, get high. Yet over and over again, I found myself top-stepping on some placement that defied reason to hold me. The days were hot, and often still, and windless deep within the womb of the North American wall, and 3 litres a day was pushing it. I found no easy pitches, forcing me to get up at dawn and climb in the dark, the punishment and stress unrelenting. But I could not stop. I had to get to the top before I ran out of water. And then one morning, I woke up to find myself at the foot of the Peregrine Pillar. Again, I won't go into blow-by-blow details, only to say it begins with an unprotected traverse on creaky flakes, where if you fell, you'd probably break your legs if you swung down into the North American wall. Then you reach the pillars, a set of high blocks sitting on top of each other that look as if they would simply topple off if you lay backed up them. Half aiding with nuts, not cams, so as to limit the chances of prizing the blocks off, and half free climbing, I'd call it frayed climbing, I made my way up this tottering nightmare, unsure if it was C158 or C4XS. Then carefully mantling, I was standing on top of the pillar, the rest of the pitch before me, A4 climbing with the pillar to hit if I fucked up. The blue room was special. The wall was getting looser and looser, the very skin of it overlaid with cardboard thin flakes that flexed and grated against my toes, flakes I feared would fracture and sail down and cut my rope. Any pin placed felt as if it could unlock the whole wall and cause it to fall down. The entire feature held on a hair trigger. Up there in the black rock, nothing was safe, especially me, my lines getting hung up again and again on downward pointing teeths of rock. Again and again I asked for a break, but never was one forthcoming. The easy snap of a portal edge corner in my finger, finding an edge, all I was given. Again and again I would find myself laughing at what I was forced to do. A hook tied to my hammer for a blind hook mover out of reach. A cam hook behind a flake as thin as bone china. Opposing beaks in a horizontal crack, crowded with broken rape tips. My food ran out, my water run low. It was my 44th birthday, and my birthday tea was a packet of M&Ms and the final brew of tea before my gas ran out. It felt like a feast. Me, of all people, 44 years old and still alive, and out here in the middle of the sea. My body grew thinner and harder, got stronger like it does on a wall, then broke down like it does on a wall. I slept with my arms above my head, as if I was surrendering, the only way to stop my hands feeling as if they were about to burst. And then I was almost there. 3 pictures of the North America wall, the end of the sea, and an easy day, I thought, but alone nothing is easy. And so I stood there, 14 days on, at the end again, and a year older, and not the man who started, with all his doubts and thoughts and old troubles. I was broken down by the wall, skin and bone and fat and brain and thought rendered to junk by the toil of it all. I stood there and looked around, feeling the feeling you get at the end of all such adventures as this, at the rim of the wall, at the edge of myself. So first thoughts as I'm reading that is it's quite technical. Like only someone who's probably climbed a big wall would probably understand some of what's going on, and it's not really filling in the details. If you were writing something for Outside magazine or something, you'd have to give some biographical detail about Jim Bridwell and about the team who climbed the wall and when it was and how long they were on it for. You'd have to explain about El Capitan. So some of it is not that clear. As if I'm in my editor's head, but I think it's got some value in it. But like if I was reading, because this book is there's quite a lot of climbing related stuff in it, where other books, I think Cold Wars and things, it wasn't super technical, and neither is Psychovertical. I think it was written for a normal person would understand what's going on. So I think if I wrote this again, if I was writing another book and I had this chapter in it, it'd be a lot longer, and it'd probably be more descriptive about some aspects of it. But it's obviously written. It was written. You're sitting in a cafeteria. You're not probably trying to write a great piece of fiction, but you probably could. You could probably make it better. Like there's lots of stuff as I'm reading it. I'm like, oh, why didn't you mention that bit? Like when I got to the top of the Peregrine Pillar, I remember that there was actually a huge bird's nest behind it, and it was all made out of pieces of plastic, and it was obviously Peregrine that built it, and it was so beautiful. It's like really, really beautiful. It was like a piece of artwork. It was really amazing. I didn't take a photograph of it for some reason either. So that was so sometimes it's a bit like if you're a comedian or you're telling a story, you're always building up to like the payoff. So the payoff would be that you're telling the story about the climbing the Peregrine Pillar, and I would probably if I were writing that again, I would probably include the smell of it, because there's a horrible smells on El Cap of like bats bat shit and bird shit and all that kind of stuff. So you'd have a smell of the smell of like when rocks move around, they actually make a smell, and you would try and create that kind of sense of like building up this, climbing this pitch. You would make it much longer, the piece of writing about that. And you would then, but then the payoff would be that you've just done this really terrifying thing that you've been thinking about for a long time, the thing that really terrifies you. And then when you get to the top, you get the payoff. There's this beautiful thing, this beautiful nest, and but then you have to start climbing the next bit above it. And I think the bit maybe there was some pictures which were really hard. I didn't know much about. I found them more scary, like the Blue Room. I remember the bits in it where I just thought like the whole thing was gonna. I remember like climbing. It was a crack, like a horizontal crack that went across this big block. And as I was like hammering in a peg, I could feel the vibration in my toes, which was touching the thing. So it just felt like the whole thing was just sitting there falling off. So, but I guess it was. I guess I wrote this very, very, very quickly. So it is what it is, really. That's kind of how I write. Things are as they are. I think first of all. It's a classic piece of sort of climbing writing where I'm starting at the end of the story, basically the end of my story. I'm on the top. I'm struggling. I'm obviously tired. I'm tired. I'm frustrated. I'm staggering. I staggered again, pulling hard in the still heat of darting with lizards and baking dwarf trees with charcoal bark. So one thing that's quite important is the cadence. There's a cadence when you're writing. So this is like about 4 words too long. I staggered, stood, staggered again, pulling hard in the still heat of darting lizards and baking dwarf trees with charcoal bark. So I think that with charcoal bark is probably, that doesn't need to be there because it kind of makes the cadence. The cadence is that right? So it's just too long. Like because your brain is on it's just like a song basically. You know how like I'm not very good at remembering songs, so I was going to ring you a little song then. I do anything for you. But there's a way it's supposed to go really. So I can recognise that's a mistake. So there's a few things like away from the edge until I was sure I was beyond gravity's high water mark, safe from the sea. So you're making, the sea of dreams, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. I think you're always, the more you write, the more you wince at things like, oh God, there's not too much in here where I was like wincing, where you use, you're a little bit cliched. Like you're not a professional. I am a professional. No, I'm not a professional writer. I just write and I make a living out of it, but I'm not a professional at it. So, if you want to, the Martin Amis says that writing is the war against cliche, and I think it's definitely true. You definitely read your old writing, and you're like, oh God, that's terrible. So it's kind of unavoidable because it's writing basically. You've just got the English language, and you've only got so many words, and everything's been said before, so it's not easy. So, but anyway, so it begins at the end of the story, and then you begin at the start, and then it all ties up back at the end, and you could like cut out the first paragraph and just paste it in before the last paragraph, and then it would just be like linear. And it should make like total sense, and it's kind of it's like really it's like super common to do that, because what is really important is if you try and be too clever with this kind of stuff, people just don't get it. Like I remember when Nick Bullock was writing his first book, and like Nick Bullock's like is probably a bit like me really. He's got a lot of really good stories to tell. But he's not like a professional. He's not a professional writer. He's like trying to become a professional writer. He writes a lot and he blogs a lot, and he's got really good things to say and stuff. but it's like is in the process of trying to become a great writer. And I think both of us, probably when we get to about 80 years old, we might have some talent at it, but we're always like reaching to try and overreaching ourselves, basically, as human beings and as writers. And I remember, like, when I was reading some of Nick's writing, as like writing is supposed to make you think, but it's not made you. It's not made. It's not. You're not meant to think like, what the fuck's going on. You know, you're supposed to be thinking like, you know, what the fuck's going on. You know, not as what the fuck's going on. Like, I don't understand what's going on. You know, what's going on? Where are we? Like, where a minute ago you were here, now we're here. Like, what's going on? So it's a very subtle thing to be able to see through the eyes of the reader. And I'm reading this, I can see that I didn't do that so well, because there's like some language in there that wouldn't make any sense to a non-climber. But that's not so bad, because it's you know, probably climbers would buy this. But you don't want to be like I don't understand, like, where a minute ago we were here and now we're here. Like, who's talking now? And so the ability to tell a story that you know intimately well because you were there, to someone who wasn't there, is actually a really important skill. And to don't assume too much. Like, people can, you can create like a fantasy, reality where you don't have to explain everything. If you read a book like, a classic book like Dune or something like that, or Harry Potter or whatever, she's not going into like the socio-economic implications of having like a wizarding, fantasy reality next to like, reality and all this kind of stuff. Not everything has to be explained, but we know when Harry's speaking and when Hermione's speaking and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of important. Yeah, I guess you're trying to condense. Like, this is only 6 pages. You're trying to 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it's only 4 pages. It's only 4 pages long. You're trying to condense 14 days? 14 days on this big wall. And about your mental and physical state, some background about you, some background about the route, some feeling of danger, the feeling of being by yourself. This person is, inflicting this climb upon himself for some deeper purpose, all in 4 pages. So maybe that does it. Maybe that's good enough. Like, some people could write this as a whole book about Climb the Sea of Dreams. And I guess Psychovertical is a book about soloing a route, which wasn't as long as this. But then you've got all the stuff in between. So it'd be quite interesting to rewrite Psychovertical and do it. You could do it again. It'd be interesting because it'd be so far. Maybe Solo the Sea of Dreams 2001. So it's going to be like 20 years ago soon. So I guess so much of experiences just end up becoming the story. It doesn't. You don't have any memory of the real experience anymore. It's like that's why you have to really. That's why when people say like, oh, I was like sexually abused, or I was, this thing happened to me. Like often these things didn't happen. The story becomes a reality. The story you've told, and I think you often find this with people who are lying all the time, who just go through life telling lies because they really start to believe these things are true. Like people who lie about climbing routes, or they've told the story so many times. It's like, well, I kind of have done it, So they don't even know what's true and not false anymore. So again, that's back to the peg story. So I guess when you start writing something, it's like it's the opportunity to tell the story about something that happened to you. And I would always tell people to begin writing something really simple, and have some, instead of having like this ginormous story, trying to tackle this massive story in your life, something that happened in your life, is try and write a really, really simple story about that's something, a really, really tiny event that actually has some really significant meaning, that everyone can understand. Like if you're talking about the time you went to the moon and your space capsule was damaged and you thought you were going to die, but you managed to repair it and get back to Earth. There's not a lot in that most people are gonna like the story if you can write it well. But if you write it badly, people are not going to like it either. So if you write a story, on like a much smaller level about, meeting up for a cup of tea with someone you've not seen for like 10 years, and or just going to just like really tiny little stories. Just write one page about something that's really, really, really mundane. Like, when you make a cup of tea, like you always like pick the tea bag out with your right hand. Like why would you do that? You can pick out with your left hand. Why do you do it like that? And when was the first cup of tea you had? And what does it represent, like a cup of tea? Or stuff like that. Do you always tie your shoelaces? Do you always tie your right foot first? I'm just talking a lot of crap now. I can't think. I'm trying to think of a good example of like in this book. There's a story called The Piece of Wood, I think, which is about this piece of wood that I used to have on the end of my bed, and that I found in Yosemite, and the bed collapsed, and I mended it with this piece of wood I'd found in Yosemite. And but it's really a story about loneliness, being lonely, that's a good example of like a really, anyway. But maybe I'll read that story next. I'll go through that. So I don't know. I was gonna actually read through it, but I don't think it's probably worth it because it's. Anyway, if you think I should, I'll stop now, and because I just can't be asked reading it all again. But but give me some feedback if you want me to reread these things and talk more about how I wrote it. But it's very hard to get back into my head when I wrote this because I was probably just wasted, and just my hands are all swollen. I'm sitting in the cafeteria, just wanting to write up some kind of semi creative experience of the event. Really, it's more like probably a high end diary entry. It's not like a piece of literature. But I'll read you some something I would say that was well written another time in this series of things. I'll go away and lend some songs for you as well to keep you going. So anyway, so that's your lot. How long have we been talking for? Nearly an hour. So anyway, as a little aside, thank you for all your emails about questions and everything else. And what I'll do tomorrow, I'll post some answers to some questions. I'll do it now because I can't be asked doing it tomorrow. And I'll have it posted, so that'll be up for tomorrow. For anybody who sent me some, so I'll answer some questions you sent me, and then you've got something to listen to tomorrow. And the day after that, I'll do a bit more reading. Maybe I'll try and have less swearing in it, because then maybe like small children can listen to it as well. Maybe fuck them. No, don't want to do that. Anyway, so thank you for listening, and I shall talk to you tomorrow.